What if the most unbelievable stories from Hollywood weren't the movies themselves, but the real events happening behind the scenes? We're talking about Titanic survivors rushing to recreate their trauma on film, silent film stars destroying actual trains for a single shot, and kidnappings orchestrated by family members. These aren't urban legends whispered in studio backlots. Every single story you're about to hear is documented fact, verified by historical records and eyewitness accounts. From tragic accidents to bizarre celebrity habits, these 13 tales reveal a Hollywood far stranger than anything dreamed up by screenwriters. Silent film star Dorothy Gibson was living her best life in April 1912. The 22-year-old actress had just wrapped up several successful films and decided to treat herself and her mother to a European vacation. After weeks touring Italy and France, her studio sent an urgent telegram. They needed her back immediately for a new film series. Gibson booked passage home on a ship everyone was talking about, a vessel being called Unsinkable. She boarded the RMS Titanic in Cherbourg, France, settling into a luxurious first-class cabin. On the night of April 14th, Gibson was playing bridge in the first-class lounge with her mother and two friends when she heard what she later described as a long, sickening crunch. Racing to the deck, she asked an officer what happened. He calmly explained they'd hit an iceberg but assured her it would only cause a slight delay. That officer was catastrophically wrong. Within minutes, the crew was shouting for passengers to grab life preservers. Gibson threw a coat over her white silk evening dress and helped her mother onto the deck. They were among the lucky 28 people who managed to board Lifeboat 7, the very first lifeboat launched from the doomed ship. For the next several hours, Gibson watched in horror as the Titanic broke apart and slipped beneath the freezing Atlantic. Here's where things get wild. Most survivors would need months, maybe years, to process such trauma. Dorothy Gibson had exactly 31 days. Her studio saw dollar signs in her survival story and immediately pushed her to capitalize on the tragedy. They convinced the shaken actress to star in a film called Saved from the Titanic, which would dramatize her experience while the disaster was still dominating headlines worldwide. Gibson didn't just act in the film. She co-wrote the script and wore the exact same white evening dress and coat she'd escaped in, still reeking of salt water and smoke. Photographers captured her blank, traumatized expression during production. She broke down crying multiple times on set. The film premiered on May 16th, just 1 month after the ship went down. It was a massive hit, selling out theaters across America. But the psychological toll was devastating. Gibson suffered what we'd now recognize as severe PTSD. She made one more film, then abandoned her career at age 23. The final twist? Every known print was destroyed in a 1914 studio fire. The only film ever made by an actual Titanic survivor, wearing her actual clothing from that night, is lost forever. Wallace Reid was the definition of a golden boy. Handsome, athletic, and talented, he was Hollywood's biggest male star in the early 1920s. Women adored him. Studios couldn't churn out his films fast enough. He could act, direct, write, and perform death-defying stunts. Reid seemed invincible, the kind of star who'd reign for decades. Then came 1919, and a train journey that would destroy everything. Reid was traveling to Oregon to film Valley of the Giants. The production train derailed, rolling 15 feet down an embankment and landing on its side. Reid suffered a deep gash to his skull that cut all the way to the bone, a severe arm injury, and damage to his already weakened back. The pain was excruciating. Any reasonable studio would have shut down production and let their star recover. But this was Hollywood, where schedules and profits mattered more than people. The studio sent their doctor with a simple solution: morphine, lots of it. Reid could keep filming and the doctor would keep him comfortable. After all, they had a movie to finish. When Valley of the Giants wrapped, Reid was supposed to start his next picture immediately. The studio kept the morphine flowing. One film turned into 2, then 3, then 8 films released in 1919 alone. Reid was hooked, and whether the studio actively supplied his habit or just looked the other way remains debated. What's certain is that by the early 1920s, Reid's addiction was taking a devastating toll. The robust leading man started dropping weight rapidly. His on-screen appearance grew gaunt. He became irritable and paranoid, yet the studio kept him working, squeezing every last dollar from their rapidly deteriorating cash cow. Everyone knows Charlie Chaplin's masterpiece, The Great Dictator, where he brilliantly mocked Adolf Hitler in 1940. It's taught in film schools, analyzed in documentaries, and remembered as a watershed moment in cinema. There's just one problem with that narrative. 3 slapstick comedians beat Chaplin to the punch by 9 whole months, and hardly anyone remembers. On January 19th, 1940, Columbia Pictures released You Nasty Spy, the 44th short film from the Three Stooges. In it, Moe Howard played Moe Hailstone, dictator of the country of Moronica. The resemblance to Hitler was unmistakable and completely intentional. Curly played Gallstone, a mashup of Hermann Goering and Benito Mussolini. Larry Fine portrayed Pebble, based on propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. The film savagely mocked Nazi Germany at a time when America was still neutral, and most of Hollywood was too terrified to touch the subject. The Stooges were all Jewish, and they packed the short film with insider jokes for Yiddish-speaking audiences. Moe's speeches included phrases like "in Puppet gehabt haben," which roughly translates to "I've had it in the belly button," an off-color Yiddish expression. They threw in beblak, meaning beans, and shalom aleichem as greetings. These linguistic jabs at having Nazi leaders speak Yiddish were delicious acts of defiance. The film even included a reference to his morphine habit, with Curly saying he wanted to shoot the works, in a double meaning that sailed over most censors' heads. Here's the truly bizarre part. The Hays office, which strictly controlled what could and couldn't be shown in films, gave You Nasty Spy a pass. Their reasoning: short films didn't matter. They weren't important enough to influence public opinion. The Stooges were considered lowbrow slapstick, not serious artists like Chaplin. So while the censors would later give Chaplin grief over The Great Dictator, the Stooges sailed through with Hollywood's first Hitler parody. When Chaplin's film finally premiered in October 1940, it received all the accolades and attention. The Great Dictator was a feature film, a prestige project from a legendary filmmaker. The Stooges had made an 18-minute short that played before other movies. History remembered Chaplin and mostly forgot about Moe, Larry, and Curly's contribution. But make no mistake, those 3 comedians were first. And in 1941, they even made a sequel called I'll Never Heal Again, proving they weren't backing down from their mission to mock tyranny. Audrey Hepburn is remembered as the epitome of elegance and grace. But in 1959, the refined actress was living with a baby deer who slept in her bathtub and accompanied her on grocery runs through Beverly Hills. This wasn't some publicity stunt. It was a necessary part of preparing for one of her strangest film roles. Hepburn had been cast in Green Mansions, playing a character named Rima, who lives in the jungle and has a mystical connection with wildlife. The animal trainer on set recognized a problem. Deer are notoriously difficult to work with, and they needed the fawn to follow Hepburn naturally on camera. His solution was unconventional. He suggested Hepburn take the baby deer home with her so it would imprint on her as its mother. Hepburn agreed, and a fawn named Pippin entered her life. The bond that formed was extraordinary. Hepburn's photographer friend Bob Willoughby documented the relationship, capturing images that still seem surreal today. Pippin, whom Hepburn nicknamed Ip, genuinely believed the actress was his mother. He would cuddle with her, sleep in a custom-made bed fashioned from a bathtub, and follow her everywhere. Hepburn's natural calm and gentle demeanor made the deer feel completely secure. Her Yorkshire Terrier, Mr. Famous, was reportedly quite jealous of the new addition. Beverly Hills residents were used to celebrity sightings, but even they stopped in their tracks when Hepburn strolled through supermarkets with a deer trotting behind her. Willoughby wrote that people couldn't believe what they were seeing. Hepburn's maid nearly fainted the first time she found Ip sleeping peacefully beside the actress. The fawn went everywhere with her during the filming period, becoming one of Hollywood's most unusual co-star relationships. When Green Mansions wrapped, Hepburn initially kept Pippin. Her husband, Mel Ferrer, had even brought the deer back to cheer her up after she suffered a miscarriage following a horse accident. But as 1960 approached and Hepburn became pregnant again, Pippin disappears from the photographic record. No pictures exist of the deer as a full-grown adult or with Hepburn's baby son. The most likely explanation is that Hepburn, being practical and protective of her coming child, returned Pippin to the trainer or a sanctuary. Deer, even hand-raised ones, can be unpredictable and potentially hazardous. Still, for those magical months in 1959, one of Hollywood's biggest stars had the world's most unusual roommate. Buster Keaton had a reputation for elaborate stunts, but even by his standards, what he planned for the General in 1926 was absolutely bonkers. He wanted to crash a full-sized steam locomotive through a burning bridge and into a river. Not a model, not miniatures. An actual working train weighing 26 tons, and he'd get exactly one shot to pull it off. The General was Keaton's passion project, loosely based on a real Civil War incident. He'd been given a massive budget of $400,000, and he planned to spend a shocking chunk of it on a single climactic scene. Keaton moved his entire production to Cottage Grove, Oregon, constructing a temporary bridge over the Roe River. The town declared the filming day a local holiday. Between 3,000 and 4,000 locals lined the riverbanks to watch history being made. Keaton positioned 6 cameras at different angles, knowing he couldn't afford a second take. The setup was deceptively simple: a bridge, a train, fire. Physics would do the rest, assuming everything went according to plan. Keaton's wife had begged him not to ride the locomotive himself, and for once, he listened. A papier-mâché dummy sat at the controls while the engineer jumped off at the last possible second. At 3 in the afternoon, Keaton gave the signal. The cameras started rolling. The locomotive chugged onto the burning bridge, gaining speed. The wooden structure held for a few agonizing seconds, then collapsed precisely as planned. The train plunged into the river with a spectacular crash, sending up an enormous spray of water and steam. That single shot cost $42,000, equivalent to roughly $750,000 today. It remains the most expensive scene in silent film history. The wreckage was so massive they just left it in the river, where it became a tourist attraction for the next 20 years, until it was finally salvaged in 1944 to help with the war effort. You can still see pieces of it in local museums. Here's the cruel irony: The General was a box office disaster. Critics hated it. Audiences weren't interested. The film earned back only about half its budget domestically. Keaton's massive gamble had failed spectacularly. The financial loss was so severe that he lost his independence as a filmmaker. Studios forced him into restrictive contracts, and he never had that kind of creative freedom again. It took decades for The General to be recognized as the masterpiece it truly was. Today, it's considered one of the greatest silent films ever made. But in 1926, all people saw was an insanely expensive train wreck that nobody wanted to watch. Keaton had literally destroyed a train and his career in one shot. Barbara La Marr was dubbed "the girl who is too beautiful" by Hollywood. But her path to stardom began with one of the most bizarre family betrayals in entertainment history. In January 1913, 16-year-old Barbara went on what she thought was a simple road trip. Her half-sister Violet Ake and a man named Cece Boxley picked her up for a 3-day automobile excursion to Santa Barbara. It seemed innocent enough at first. Then Barbara realized something terrifying. They weren't planning to take her home. Days passed. Barbara's parents filed a missing persons report. The police issued warrants for kidnapping. Violet Ake, Barbara's own flesh and blood, was wanted by authorities for abducting her teenage sister. When Violet and Boxley discovered the warrants, they panicked and released Barbara back to Los Angeles. But here's where the story takes a disturbing turn. Instead of retreating from the spotlight, Barbara embraced it. She testified against her sister in court, though the case was eventually dropped. The teenage actress had discovered something valuable. Scandal sold. People were talking about her. Newspapers were printing her name. Barbara La Marr had learned the power of publicity, and she'd ride that wave straight to Hollywood stardom, becoming one of the silent era's most famous faces. Dolores Hart had everything Hollywood could offer. She'd shared passionate on-screen kisses with Elvis Presley in both Loving You and King Creole. She was beautiful, talented, and on the verge of major stardom in the early 1960s. Studios were fighting over her. Audiences adored her. Then in 1963, at the height of her career, Hart did something nobody saw coming. She walked away from it all to become a nun. Hart entered the Abbey of Regina Lotus in Connecticut, trading red carpets for prayer and contemplation. She took the name Mother Dolores and never looked back. What makes her story even more remarkable is that she maintained her connection to Hollywood. She's the only nun in history with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She remains a voting member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, casting her ballot for the Oscars from behind convent walls. From kissing Elvis to kissing the ring, Dolores Hart chose a path that continues to fascinate people decades later. Surrealist artist Salvador Dalí never did anything halfway, and that included pet ownership. While most people were content with cats and dogs, Dalí kept an ocelot named Babu. This wasn't a pet that stayed home. Dalí would walk Babu through the finest restaurants in Paris on a gold-studded leash, delighting in the chaos that followed. One famous incident occurred at Le Trembleur restaurant. A wealthy woman spotted the ocelot and began screaming in terror. Dalí, ever the showman, calmly explained that she had nothing to fear. It wasn't a wild animal, he assured her. It was simply a house cat he'd painted with an elaborate optical art design. The woman apparently believed him, or at least stopped screaming. Babu accompanied Dalí to photo shoots, interviews, and public appearances. The artist understood that eccentricity was part of his brand, and nothing said eccentric genius quite like casually dining with a spotted wildcat. The 1956 film The Conqueror is remembered today not for John Wayne's questionable portrayal of Genghis Khan, but for one of Hollywood's most horrifying tragedies. The production chose to film in Utah, downwind from a Nevada nuclear test site, where 11 atomic devices had recently been detonated. The crew spent weeks in an area contaminated with radioactive fallout. Then, incredibly, they brought 60 tons of that radioactive dirt back to Hollywood for studio reshoots. The consequences were catastrophic. Of the 220 people involved in the production, 91 developed cancer. John Wayne passed away from it. So did co-star Susan Hayward. Agnes Moorehead developed and succumbed to cancer. Director Dick Powell developed cancer. The statistics were far beyond what would be expected in a normal population. While some debate whether the film location was definitively responsible, the correlation is undeniable and chilling. The Conqueror stands as a grim reminder that some locations are simply too hazardous for filmmaking, no matter how perfect the scenery. In September 1920, actress Olive Thomas was honeymooning in Paris with her husband Jack Pickford. After a late-night argument, Thomas went to the bathroom in darkness and grabbed the wrong bottle. She drank mercury bichloride, a common treatment for syphilis at the time. Rushed to the hospital, doctors couldn't save her. She passed 5 days later at just 25 years old. The scandal that followed was explosive. Whose medicine had it really been? Thomas's or Pickford's? The mystery was never definitively solved, leaving one of Hollywood's earliest scandals shrouded in questions. In November 1924, film producer Thomas Ince joined media mogul William Randolph Hearst aboard his yacht for a birthday celebration. Charlie Chaplin and actress Marion Davies were among the guests. Ince suddenly fell ill and was removed from the yacht. He passed shortly after. The official cause was heart failure, but rumors immediately swirled. Some claimed Hearst had caught Davies with Chaplin and shot at him, accidentally hitting Ince instead. The body was quickly cremated with no autopsy. Nearly a century later, the truth remains elusive. Supermodel Heidi Klum revealed an unusual habit that surprised even her biggest fans. She keeps all of her children's baby teeth in a small velvet pouch inside her purse at all times. Klum considers them good luck charms and says having them close makes her feel connected to her kids when she's traveling for work. She admits it's weird, but insists it's meaningful. The collection includes teeth from all 4 of her children, traveling the world with her wherever she goes. Margaret Hamilton's iconic green makeup as the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz was slowly harming her throughout filming. The copper-based paint was extremely toxic. During the fire scene where the witch disappears in flames, the makeup caught fire on Hamilton's face and hands, causing second-degree burns. She needed 6 weeks to recover. Her stunt double was also severely burned during filming. After returning, Hamilton refused to do any more fire scenes. The paint contained chemicals that would be banned today, making her performance both brilliant and genuinely hazardous. These 13 stories prove that Hollywood's real history is often more unbelievable than anything screenwriters could imagine. From survivors recreating their trauma to silent stars destroying trains, from family kidnappings to radioactive film sets, the truth behind the glamour is stranger, darker, and more fascinating than fiction. Classic Hollywood continues to surprise us, revealing that the most compelling stories weren't always the ones projected on screen. They were the bizarre, tragic, and extraordinary events happening just behind the camera.